Hi, and welcome to the 2.07 Presidents and Policies instructional video for U.S. History Part B. In this video, we're going to be going over the major concepts that are presented in Lesson 2.07, discussing what your work will be and what your specific goals are for the lesson. Lesson 7, Presidents and Policies, focuses on 3 U.S. presidents and what their foreign affairs policies were. It focuses on specifically Theodore Roosevelt, pictured here, William Howard Taft, his successor, pictured here, and Woodrow Wilson, who came after Taft as well. These 3 presidents each had a very distinct foreign policy, and our goals for the lesson are to identify elements of Theodore Roosevelt's philosophy in his foreign policy, identify the major concept that shaped Taft's foreign policy, dollar diplomacy, and describe Woodrow Wilson's goals for diplomacy and his international policies as president. So we're focusing in this lesson on foreign affairs, international policies of all 3 presidents. In this particular lesson, you're going to see on your daily checklist that we are focusing on pages 616 to 623. There is a reading guide that you will need to download and print off so that you can answer those questions while you read the material for this lesson in the textbook. Download your reading guide by clicking on this file right here on slide 3 of your lesson, or you can get it by going into the Unit 2 resources and clicking on materials once you are in that area. In this lesson, there's also a Roosevelt, Taft, or Wilson online activity to complete, Chapter 27 highlights, and a quiz to take once you are finished with this reading. To access the quiz, you're going to go just beneath the 2.07 lesson and click on the quiz, which is right here. So let's take a look at your reading for today's lesson, or for the 2.07 lesson. The reading begins on 616 and starts with the open door policy. The open door policy was established by William McKinley. And President McKinley was actually assassinated and followed up by his Vice President Roosevelt. The open door policy was something that McKinley established by trying to have open trade with China. Because China was such a big country with such a large population, most of the larger countries in the world, especially in Europe, wanted to compete with the United States for trading rights with China because there were so many people to sell American goods to or European goods to. So it was a big market, and essentially McKinley established a statement that said, instead of fighting over spheres of influence or rights to trade in China, he wanted to secure the idea that trade would be open to any countries interested to trade in China, that it would not be closed off to anybody. When there was something called the Boxer Rebellion in China, in which some Chinese rebel groups were trying to kick the foreigners out and prevent their basically commercial invasion of the country, the United States and other European powers came together to put down the rebellion and agreed to support the open door policy in the end, due to U.S. support in ending the Boxer Rebellion. Now, McKinley kind of paved the way for open trade and pursuing trade in China. Roosevelt had a very different view. He didn't focus quite as much on economics, but he did realize that in places like Central and South America and other territories that the U.S. had, that economic interests were at play. He was a strong believer in stating that the United States would not control areas like Central and South America or territories in the East like the Philippines, but that the United States would play more of a police role if something were to eventually happen that would prevent the United States from realizing its economic interest in these areas. So the Roosevelt corollary was really stating just that, that the United States had the policy of stepping in if things got messy in a particular area, and it would prevent the United States from really having access to trade or to raw materials or any other economic interest in a particular area. He called, when describing his foreign policy, um, basically Roosevelt considered his policy one of speaking softly and carrying a big stick, meaning that he didn't force his policy upon these nations, but when military action was needed or police force action was needed to protect their interests, he would step in. So that was the Roosevelt corollary, and that was the basis of Roosevelt's involvement in international affairs. One of the things that really shaped his presidency was his involvement with the Panama Canal. He wanted to basically establish this little small strip of land that connected North and South America and create a canal that would give access from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. This was a big deal to the United States because now the United States had territories in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and they needed it not only for military strategic reasons, but for economic reasons as well, to quickly get from one ocean to the other. It would speed up access from the Atlantic to the Pacific and keep that water route open that would allow trade to go to the east, meaning to China, etc. Now, Roosevelt realized that the Panama Canal could not be purchased at the time because Panama was actually part of Colombia. It was a colony of Colombia, and Colombia did not want to give up its rights to Panama. Panama rebelled when Colombia tried to exert its control over that area, and the United States stepped in and supported Panama, which eventually became independent. The United States then purchased a 10-mile strip of land in which they created the canal to connect Atlantic to Pacific. So it was very deliberate action by Roosevelt to step in and make sure that the United States had clear access to that strip of land into the canal. Now, the canal was actually returned, control of it was actually returned back to the Panama people in 1999, so it was much more recent. The United States had control over most of the canal until that time period. Now, Taft, who was the successor to Roosevelt, or the president who followed Roosevelt, had a little different feel to it. He agreed with Roosevelt that in times of need that the United States would step in and use military action to protect its interests in other countries. But Taft really wanted to focus more on using the economy by showing other countries that they had an economic interest there and helping them develop their economy, all the while the United States would benefit economically from their developments in those countries. An example would be Taft's interest in developing railroads in China. That was something that would definitely help the United States. It would give them easier transportation, more access to goods, and would also give people who were involved in creating or building the railroads a job and a lot of income to the United States in that way. So Taft felt that if you established an economic relationship with other countries, that it would be less likely that you would have a problem. He did agree, though, again, with Roosevelt that at sometimes it was necessary to knock heads together, as he put it, especially when it came to very volatile regions like Central America. And we'll see that he actually had to send the Marines to Nicaragua on several occasions. Now, Wilson, who followed Taft as president, had a very different idea. He was not the dollar diplomat that Taft was. He wasn't although he definitely had U.S. economic interest in mind. It wasn't the speak softly or carry a big stick. It wasn't dollar diplomacy. Wilson was focusing more on extending democracy through economic ties. Okay, so he felt that if the country established economic ties to another region and provided them goods that would make their life more comfortable and more accessible and basically more American, that these ideas of American democracy would follow this economic tie, that they would not only be buying their goods, but their ideas and the relationship established through the economy would spread political ideas too, and that democracy would spread. So Wilson was very interested in his mind, improving the world by spreading the American economy and also the American ideals. Now, this did not mean that he felt that the people in the regions he was trading with should be free or should control their government. A lot of the times that wasn't the case. He basically just meant that the United States should have that growing influence to make the world better for other peoples. That's basically the focus of this lesson. You do have a little bit more reading of some international affairs that occurred when Wilson was in office, including some troubles with Mexico, and also getting involved and intervening in the Caribbean. Finally, then your book gets into a detailed look at the creation of the Panama Canal and how fighting yellow fever was crucial in allowing for the successful completion of the canal. Once you have finished your reading for the lesson and filled out your reading guide, you're going to come back to the lesson in your course, and you're going to complete the Roosevelt, Taft, or Wilson activity here. And it talks about how it's going to give you a quote from each president, and you need to match the president to the statement or establish who said it or what it means. So for example, this first quote that is given here most accurately describes Theodore Roosevelt. And if I wanted to check my work, I can click that check button. To move to the next question, you can simply click the arrow at the bottom of the screen, and it will ask you another question here, which is the best interpretation of the excerpt. So you have to read the quote and choose the answer that applies. So it's either going to be matching or multiple choice, mostly in nature. Once you have finished the activity, you can come back into the lesson and read over the chapter 27 highlights. Don't forget these. These are really helpful in preparing not only for a unit test, but also for a final exam in U.S. history. So always make sure that you save these. You can copy and paste them, or you can do a screenshot, whatever is easiest for you. But chapter highlights are very, very helpful in preparing for a unit test or final exam, or even for a quiz. Once you finish taking a look at the chapter highlights, which go over a couple screens here, screen number 4 and slide number 5, then it prompts you to go into the lesson for 207. So go beneath the 207 lesson and complete the quiz, which you will find right here. Good luck with lesson 2.07. As always, if you have any questions, please contact me.